Hey there YouTube, you've got the King of Cows here. Glad you clicked on my video today. I want to talk about hierarchical data in Excel. Namely, I want to talk about dependent lists and series of dependent lists when you're working with bigger data sets. Now, I'm not going to go into big detail on how to do dependent lists. I'll go into a little bit, but I really want to show you how you can really scale this up. And we're going to do so using Python because that's what I'm the most familiar with. But let me show you how to do this, or what the end result is. So say you've got a user that needs to classify something. Maybe it's a hammer. Well, by the way, we're using Google's taxonomy here to do this. And I don't actually know where they're going to classify hammers, so hardware. No. Hardware tools, hammers. Okay, so let's see if we can find that. Hardware and tools, and do we have hammers? We should. So we actually have a nested set of lists here that depend on uh, the previous list. So this, in other words, the drop-down menu here changes, or what's required of this field changes based on the parent category. So if I try to do hardware, tools, and let's just say I misspelled hammer, it doesn't match. It forces the user into using the prescribed taxonomy. Or maybe I did something just obscure, like, I don't know, shovel, rake, monster thing. Obviously doesn't work. So, but if I type in hammers, it does work. Or I've got this nice list that I can go through and find what I'm looking for. So this can be very useful for a number of things. I'll let you use your imagination to decide what those things are in your application. But I'm going to give you just a kind of a bare bones, brute force way that you can do this with big data sets. So what I've got here is a second sheet called Category Data, and this is the home of a bunch of named ranges. So if you go to the name manager here and look at all of these named ranges. And what you'll notice is these name ranges are just category names, and they don't have spaces or special characters. And then the values of these ranges are the values of the child category, the next level down from the parent category. So here's our top level categories, animals and pet supplies. Well, the next level down is live animal, pet supplies, and then this ZZZZZ stop category that I put just to let me know that we've reached the end, or there is no further classification. So these categories here, if we look at the named range for them, we'll see that it is. Let's see if I can find it. Name manager. The name range for this category should be animals and pet supplies with no spaces. So there we are. And these are all the acceptable names, or the acceptable categories under that parent category. All right, you confused yet? Good. Now, if we come over here to this hardware and look at our actual data validation rules, I'm going to gloss over this. So this is in data validation. All right, it gets its source from a list from category 1, which is this B column here. This one is much the same, but it's using the indirect formula, and it's looking up the name of the value to the left, and it's trying to find a range, a list in the form of a range that matches that um, indirect formula. So basically what it does is it looks up hardware, and then under hardware, can it find a named range called hardware, and under if it does, return the list of values under hardware. And we do this for 3 levels of taxonomy here. So let's jump into the Python code on how to do this. So I'm going to start with a blank idle window, and I have on the left screen, that I hope you cannot see, my cheat sheet for how to do this. So you'll see me copy and pasting some stuff in to kind of expedite it. Here's our imports: pandas, XLS writer, .utility, and we're going to import just Excel row to cell, row column to cell. We don't need anything more than that. And we're going to import the operating system, OS. Now, let's do the normal stuff that's boring. Let's get our path to work with the file. Alternatively, you could give it an explicit path. And we want to read our data. So I have created a file called example categories. Just for simplicity, it's just 3 levels, and I have just changed the ampersands and removed some special characters and changed the space, greater than sign, space to a tab to make the Google data more tabular. So we're going to read that into memory, into a data frame, and of course we're separating on the tab. The data type is string, and I want to fill any null values with this zzzzz stop. And if you recall, the reason why is I want to know when I'm at the end of the category, or if the category has no further classification levels. All right, now we want to build in this Excel file that we were just looking at. So let's come up with a name. We're going to call it dependent list example. So dependent list ex.xlxx, and that is just the name of the file. And since we don't have any data that we're going to write per se, normally I would have like a data frame, so like an Excel sheet or a SQL database or some kind of data that I'm pulling from to write to an Excel sheet, so that then somebody can go and pilfer through and classify. But since we don't have any, we're going to have a blank data frame. So I'm going to assign a variable to pd.dataframe. So this is just a blank data frame. Now we need to create a writer object. The writer equals pd.excelWriter, and we're going to pass the file name and tell it the engine we want to use is XLSX writer. And now we're going to write our blank data frame to Excel using the writer, and the index equals false. So nothing's actually happened yet. If you did this and ran it, it would not create the file. So because you have to save the writer. So I always like to put this at the bottom if I do anything with XLSX writer with pandas, so that I don't forget to save it at the end. Now, we've got our data frame written to Excel, and we want to create an Excel workbook. So we do this by assigning a variable called workbook equals writer.book. And we want to make some sheets. So worksheet is a variable that points to writer.sheet, sheet 1, and we'll create another sheet called category data. So workbook.add worksheet category data, and cat data sheet points to the category data sheet. All right, now let's get lists of category unique category in levels 1 and 2. And pandas gives us an easy way to do that. I'm just going to set a cat1 list equals df cat, so our category data frame, cat1, so that column that's category 1, get only the unique values and save it to a list. Do the same with category 2. Alright, so our first level of taxonomy, we're going to use a for loop. Alright, and I'm just going to paste this whole thing in here, and I'll explain what's going on. So for each category in our unique category 1 list, we want to write a string, which is the category, the actual name of the category, to the current row and column that we have specified. So our row, we will just start with row 0. Why not? That's the very top row of Excel. So column or row 1 in Excel, row 0 in Python because of zero-based indexing, of course. And we're going to write each category to that row. So if I ran this now, it would create a column on the category data sheet page on column number 1, which is actually the second column. So column B, it would write each unique top level category there. And that's great, but really what we want to do is define a name for that range. So we'll do that like this. We'll find the length of that category 1 list, and that's how far down we want the named range to go. And we're going to define a name for the workbook called category 1, and that's going to be the range of data from B1 to B plus the length of the list, which I have called row count. Great. You following me? Good. So, second level. I tell you what, why don't we just go on and run this and see what that looks like. Alright, so this executed with no errors. Great. That rarely happens for me. And if I open up this Excel sheet, we have a blank sheet because we passed a blank data frame. And under category data, look at there, all the top level categories. They have 21, it looks like. Alright, let's close that out. And we'll close this down. Now let's do our second level of taxonomy. Alright, so this one is a little more involved, but really it's not so bad. So for the category in cat1 list. So why cat1 list? Well, we want to look at each top level category and get the corresponding list of category 2, the second level of categories. So another way of saying that is we want for each top level category, we want a unique list of the child categories for each top level category. So we do this by creating another smaller data frame that we overwrite with each for loop, and we set it equal to the location in dfcat where dfcat category 1 equals the current category in the category list. So what that means is everywhere that there is animals and pet supplies, I want to return all of the values under that. Alright, I'm not doing a good job explaining that, so I'm going to copy over the example categories or just open it up in Excel and explain what I need. So by taking this dfcat and pulling only where the first level of taxonomy equals category 1, what would be the Excel way to do that? Well, I could just do a quick little filter and have the same result. So I only want to return a data frame that has got the values animals and pet supplies. And so this is the data frame that's going to give me. Pretty nifty, huh? And it's going to do that for each distinct list. So Excel's already done this for us with this filter functionality. But this is the same way of doing it with pandas. And we're building a unique frame each time. Now we're going to take that second list, the smaller data frame, and we're going to just get the category 2 values that are unique, and we're going to save that to a list. That's really all we want from it. And our row count is going to be the length of the list. Our column number we're going to increment by 1. Our row always starts at 0. And cell start and cell end is just going to be for the named range so that we can pass to Excel where the range starts and where that range ends. And we use that function we imported, Excel row to cell. This takes the integer number and converts it to A1 notation, which is what we've used down here. And so now we have a nested loop for category in df category list, category datasheet dot write, our current row, current column number, and the category name, and increment it by 1 and repeat till we're done with our category 2 list. And then set the row back to 0 so it moves to top, and define the name. And the name is going to be whatever the category name is without the special characters. So no spaces, no commas. We could loop through this. I just did this because this is just easy to see. But you could remove all sorts of characters with a loop if you'd like. Or feeding from a list, or ever how you want to do it. And so basically, like if you had one called tools and equipment, it would become tools and equipment with no spaces. Or if there was a comma in here, it would get rid of that comma. Make sense? And the range starts on the sheet category data, where the cell starts in the A1 notation and the cell ends. Cool. Glad you're following me so far. Now, I want to do our third level of taxonomy. And for this, they say, don't ever copy your code. And I think it's easier to explain without setting up a little helper function. So we're just going to copy our code and just change some names. So really all we need to do is change category 2 here, category 1 to category 2, and category 1 to category 2. And this category 3, we want a unique list of what's in category 3, not category 2. So we just incremented that by 1. I'll let you come up with a more efficient way to do this. This works for 3 levels without having to overthink it. And the rest of it's really the same. It picks up the column number from before and it adds 1 to it. Row always starts at 0. Cell start, cell end, the exact same. It loops through the list and outputs the data, replacing the spaces and the commas. And we place that. We give the range, the name to the range for the same, starting and ending position of the data set that we've just written to the to the Excel sheet. Whew. Gets a little complicated there for me. I know it doesn't for y'all, but y'all are brilliant, and I'm just a fella trying to figure out how to categorize things. Alright, now let's write data validation rules to the sheet. Actually, let's run this. Let me show you what this does. Alright, it ran with no errors. Can you believe that? Alright, we're pulling it up and it loaded. Alright, so here's our category data. Look at there. That's our first level, and then I don't know how far our second level goes. Maybe this far? Yeah, that looks about right. And then here's our third level that goes all the way out to HH. How many columns is that? 215? Wow, that would take a while to do, wouldn't it? And each of these columns have named ranges. So let's look at our formulas, our name manager, and see that that's all the name ranges of the parent category with no spaces, no special characters. That's very important. So now on this sheet, I want some data validation rules. So I want little drop downs here that tell me what I can and can't input into that cell. And I want them to be dependent on the prior drop down. So let's do that. So we'll go on and X out of that. And then I'm going to pull up our example, if I can find it. All right. Now, let's write. So we're actually not writing to the worksheet. We're just setting a data validation rule for a specific cell. So for B2, let's validate. That would be sheet 1, if you remember. We set worksheet to sheet 1. We want to set a validation rule. That's a list. And the source is equal to the named range category 1. Simple enough, right? Because we just explicitly passed it. We want that to be called category 1 because that is the parent, you might call it the root category. Now, for worksheet 2, it's a little bit slightly more complicated, but not really. We'll place that value at C2, so the next cell to the right, and we're going to validate as a list, and the source is also a named range, but we have to infer that range from whatever the cell value to the left is. So we're going to take whatever that cell value is, and we're going to substitute. We're going to get rid of the spaces. We're going to go, replace space with no string at all, and then replace the commas with no string at all. And we're going to direct whatever that name is to the named range using the indirect formula. Now, if you don't know how to do that, just look up some videos on using the indirect formula. It's pretty cool. And we're going to do that again for the third level of taxonomy. So we've got here D2, validate, list, and I can put this all back on the same sheet. There we go. And you'll notice it looks pretty much the same. I guess I need to close off that guy right there. And there we go. We've got, oh, that wouldn't have worked, would it? All right. And there we go. This should net the result we're looking for. So let's just hit our F5. Oh, no errors. Great. And open up our dependent list. And there we go. We've got our categories. We've got our named ranges. And we've got our data validation rules. So category 1, category 2, category 3. And guess what? We can just copy these down if we need to. Or you could even write it for more than just one cell. I mean, actually, I do that all the time. Just for the sake of simplicity, I did it for one in this example. And so now, if we have, like a hammer that we're trying to classify here. So maybe your pandas data set that you wrote here on column 1 has got the list of items you want to classify. We've got, if I remember, it was under hardware and tools and hammers. And then if we want, to pedal dolphins, maybe we've got our dolphin toy. Maybe there's a, let's see. Oh. Maybe there's a category called toys. I don't know. Yes, toys. Toys. There's a bunch of different toys. Bath toys. Oh, yeah, dolphin toy would probably go under bath toys. Don't you think? You'd probably play with the dolphins in the bath. Anyway, this gives you a way to apply data validation rules. You can use your imagination on this. Maybe you've got, category 4, category 5 that you want to do. You could define functions to uh, work with varying levels of taxonomy. So maybe you want it to be adaptable. Maybe you don't want to copy code and you want to generalize it so that you can just pass category lists and that sort of thing. There's a bunch of ways to skin a cat, but I hope I've given you just a way that you can kind of brainstorm ideas in a way that you can write dependent lists to Excel and create your own data validation rules in Excel to pass out to, for you to work with yourself or to pass out with your coworkers so that they can work with hierarchical data. If this was interesting to you, let me know and I'll show you other ways that I use Excel validation for data entry purposes. I appreciate you watching. I'm glad you bared with me till the end here, and if you did, I'm going to ask you if you'll hit that like button and subscribe. I'd really appreciate it, and I'll catch you next time, I hope.